As somebody that's been reading up with all the news related to the DCU and James Gunn and Peter Safran and what's canon and what's not canon and what's resetting and rebooting and what's coming back and not coming back and who's being recast and who's not being recast, I must say that I've come away fairly unimpressed with Mr. Gunn's performance so far. I remember early on, I thought, hey, I think it's kind of cool that he's actually out there like talking to people, talking to fans, saying, hey, we might not make all the changes that you want, but we do hear the things that you want and we're going to try and incorporate things in there, and I want to clarify all this stuff. And every time he tries to clarify things, he just makes it like a billion times worse. And I think it was probably pretty stupid for him to put his name behind that Flash movie. There's no way James Gunn, as a seasoned superhero filmmaker at this point, thought that that was a good movie or one of the best superhero movies of all time. Probably not the smartest thing in the world. He also stated specifically that the big reset for the DCEU into the DCU was actually going to be the Flash movie. Remember that? They said, yeah, it's going to be a reset. It might not change everything, but it's going to reset a lot of stuff for the DCU and allow us to incorporate some actors moving forward and story elements moving forward. And now he's changing his tune again, obviously since the Flash movie wasn't very good, and throwing James Wan and Aquaman 2, Aquaman the Lost Kingdom, whatever you want to call it, and Jason Momoa under the bus in the process, while elevating three characters that, quite frankly, probably aren't all that important to the future of the DCU itself, because I guess he likes the actors or whatever. I don't understand any of the decisions he's making, but let's go over what we do know. Gunn stated on social media, yes, some actors will be playing characters they played in other stories, and some plot points might be consistent with plot points from dozens of films, shows, and animated projects that have come from DC in the past, but nothing is canon until Creature Commandos and Legacy. Xolo Maridueña will continue playing Blue Beetle in the DCU, as Viola Davis will Amanda Waller, and John Cena will Peacemaker. So there you go. We have more concrete confirmation that it will be Blue Beetle, Amanda Waller, and Peacemaker that are staying on board as far as the casting moving forward. And I imagine we're going to get a couple more additions to that. There's no way that he's going to fire his brother. That dude is definitely going to return. I imagine his wife likely will be returning. She was in the Peacemaker cast. We do know that he has a strong relationship with Margot Robbie, who is now a billion-dollar superstar after the Barbie movie, likely to return as Harley Quinn, but he has not confirmed that. Maybe they're trying to hash out the contract details or whatever. So there are likely to be a few more people. The thing that's obviously been making people mad is no Henry Cavill as Superman, no Ben Affleck as Batman, no Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and apparently no Jason Momoa as Aquaman. A lot of the castings that people really like, and that's really one of the things that Zack Snyder really got right across the board, was the casting of a lot of the heroes. Other than Ezra Miller as Flash, I imagine at this point, even James Gunn himself would admit that that was an enormous mistake. Probably Zack Snyder too. Yeah, that one probably didn't go so well, but the other castings were generally well received, and those are obviously the really big stars, not only of the DCEU, but they're going to be the big stars of the DCU. What's the point of bringing Xolo Maridueña over as Blue Beetle? He's going to be a supporting character anywhere that he shows up. He's the kid from Cobra Kai. He's not really a movie star. I understand people love Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, just another henchman sitting behind the scenes. And John Cena is Peacemaker. John Cena would make a better Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner is a more important character than Peacemaker, but James Gunn obviously produced and directed and wrote Peacemaker, and we're going to be getting a second season of that. But that's where it even gets more confusing with everything that he said. A second season of Peacemaker doesn't even make sense, because he stated nothing is canon until Creature Commandos next year, a sort of aperitif to the DCU, and then a deeper dive into the universe with Superman Legacy after that. It's a very human drive to want to understand everything all the time, but I think it's okay to be confused on what's happening in the DCU, since no one has seen anything from the DCU yet. But that's not technically true, because James Gunn himself said that, the Flash was a reset into the DCU. So you imagined everything after that was going to be part of the DCU. Now he says everything after Creature Commandos. But if that's the case, then why is Xolo Maridueña coming back as Blue Beetle? If none of it's canon and none of it really mattered, why are you bringing these legacy pieces back from the DCEU moving forward? You say it's a very human drive to want to understand things. And in this case, yes, because it's getting very confusing. Why would you make Peacemaker Season 2 that's attached to the DCU to follow up Peacemaker Season 1 that's attached to the DCEU and a bunch of events and characters and referencing things that never happened anymore? Like, what's the point? There's no consistency to this. There's no logic to it. And it just gets more and more confusing every time he tries to explain everything. How about you just not say anything? Pull a Kevin Feige and don't really give out any information, And then when people see something that they like from the DCEU show up in the DCU, they go, oh my goodness, was that an Easter egg? Or was that something really important? Is that something I was supposed to notice? You know, and it kind of really throws the Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom movie under the bus. People might forget, but Aquaman is the most successful DCEU movie ever made. It went over $1.1 billion. That's an enormous haul. Warner Brothers Discovery have been taking financial hit after financial hit based on these leftovers of the DCEU, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, Flash, Blue Beetle, Black Adam, all these things coming out after they made the big change to James Gunn and Peter Safran. And that's the one movie that has a chance to maybe make some money back. I don't think a lot of people have confidence in it at this time, but for some reason, James Gunn decided to put his weight and his reputation behind the Flash movie that he likely knew was bad, rather than the Aquaman movie that was much more likely to actually be lucrative and financially successful. And you just get confused and you're like, well, I guess there really isn't a reason to go see the Aquaman unless it's maybe you really like Jason Momoa as the character and you want to see his final hurrah before he becomes Lobo in the DCU moving forward under James Gunn. And he says, yeah, it's okay to not know everything. Well, I agree with that. I don't need to know the details of everything, but the details that you are giving out don't make any sense. Like the fact that you said the Flash was the reset point for the DCU doesn't make any sense, because now you're saying it's actually Creature Commandos, which actually has a lot of big name voice actors attached to it. I think Frank Grillo's in there. David Harbour, I think, is in there. And I imagine those guys are going to show up, in live action movies at some point. So there's some importance to Creature Commandos, but is that really what you want your cutting off point, the beginning of your legacy of the DCU to be this cartoon that not many people are going to watch or probably remember? It's also very, very weird. It seems that in the DCU, Jaime Reyes, Amanda Waller, and Christopher Smith will look exactly like their counterparts from movies and TV shows like Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, and Blue Beetle, but they will be different versions of the characters. We can expect that some details will remain consistent between canons, but otherwise the slate is being cleaned. And that's the most confusing part. Do you want a clean slate or not? If you want a clean slate, just clean it up, just get rid of all that stuff. Don't bring any of the actors over. Don't mention any of the plot points. Don't mention the Peacemaker TV show. Reboot it all or don't reboot it all. And make some sense of all this stuff, because every time he decides to make a decision, it feels like he's just contradicting himself. And I think after the string of failures of the DCEU that is just mounting and mounting and mounting up and likely is going to end with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, every time he goes out there and talks, it feels like James Gunn puts himself in a more awkward position, in a worse position to actually keep people invested or excited that anything is actually going to change. It feels like it's Walter Hamada again. I got a big plan, but I'm going to change all the details of the plan as I go along and never make sense of anything. And it doesn't matter if you portrayed the character well, in the DCEU. Apparently it only matters if James Gunn likes you or he respects you or something like that. We had to get rid of Henry Cavill as Superman, right? Because we're doing a young Superman story. Well, guess what we found out like a month and a half ago? It's not a young Superman story. He casted a guy that was 30 years old and basically looks the same age as Henry Cavill. And it all just gets weirder and weirder and weirder and more confusing. And it's like, I don't know, man. I like Superman. I'll definitely check out the Superman Legacy movie. But at this point, I'm not expecting much. And I'm a diehard DC fan. I'm an enormous Superman fan. I imagine a lot of people out there that were hoping there was going to be something that could compete with the MCU from the DC heroes. Maybe if they weren't even like DC Comics fans at this point are like, why should I even bother, man? It's been like a decade and you guys have fumbled this thing every single step of the way. And it doesn't appear that James Gunn is really doing much to change that. He's just dropping the ball over and over again every time he goes on to social media and tries to engage people and just fucking confuse them more. I just continuously get these very, very bad vibes from James Gunn and the DCU, and the fact that they don't really have a plan. He's got a plan, but it ain't a real plan. It ain't set in stone, and I think he's going to drop the ball on this one real hard. There's a video right here. Also a link in the video description.